Hello there everyone. I wanted to take the time today to make a quick video for you all on push-ups. I think push-ups were one of my #1 most listed New Year's goals and goals that people want to work through this year. So I wanted to take you through today some progression and ways that you can work towards getting your first push-up or improving at push-ups across time. So many of you probably feel like push-ups are impossible, especially if you're a female trainee. Upper body strength seems really hard and impossible when you first start training. So let's take some time today to go through some ways that you can actually improve this, improve your strength, and get your first off the floor push-up this year. If you enjoy this video, you're excited for more, you like this type of content, please do me a favor right now. If you can go ahead and like this video, hit subscribe, it helps me a ton, and leave a comment if you found this helpful and other things that you would want to see videos on as well. So let's get started. So when we're talking about doing our first push-up, I think a lot of people, their first inclination is to do knee push-ups or push-ups from the knee, which there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's a fine variation if you want to target the chest in a way that is from the floor, which isn't as hard, or maybe you don't have the skill for like a flat normal push-up. But I personally am not a fan of knee push-ups in general if your goal in the end is from the floor push-ups. Now, that's okay. I'm not saying that they're wrong or bad or harmful. I don't want anyone to think that, but personally with my clients in my programs, the list method, or in general, my guidance is if you're trying to achieve your first push-up, to do it not from your knees. So we don't want to be doing this, like instead of doing knee push-ups, this traditional approach, right? Which is totally fine. I want us to instead practice actually doing our push-up in the position of which we'd be doing our push-up. So one of the things that you can do before you even do push-ups is to even practice being in that push-up position. So in a moment here, I'm gonna take you through some, there's bros grunting in the gym right now. So in a moment, I'm gonna take you through some ways to do incline push-ups, which is one of my favorite progressions. But what I want you to think of is working on that approach of getting on the ground. And so one of the ways that you could do this is adding in something like high plank holds or high planks or arm extended planks, whatever you want to call them, in your routine as core work to help you get used to being in that position and holding your body weight up. So this is going to look like this. So instead of being in that knee position, getting out here and putting your arms about shoulder width apart and then elevating your feet back, right? And you don't want to think about your weight being backwards or too far forwards. And the same holds true when you get into your push-up. You want to have that nice center shoulder over your wrist. And if you have wrist pain, especially in the push-up or planks, you might be because you're leaning too far forward rather than centering this back. So your whole body weight is kind of evenly distributed across your body rather than pushing all that weight on your wrist or sagging your way down. You want to have a nice tight core. You want to have that tucked hip, pin ribs that you hear traditionally in a lot of strength training, and you want to hold that there. So that plank position is the start of your push-up position. So something that you can do to work towards that strength with developing stronger push-ups over time is adding in something like 3 sets of like building upwards of 30 seconds to a minute of those high plank holds. That could be a way that you can just develop holding your own body weight, getting used to having the core strength and whole body stability to doing that. A lot of people think that a push-up is only chest muscles and only upper body, but being able to distribute your weight evenly within that rather than pushing it all on just your arms actually is probably what's going to help you execute your first push-up or build reps and sets within them. So let's now move on to inclines. So as I've established, I am not a fan of knee push-ups if your goal is floor push-ups. So what I want to do instead is I want you to think of that high plank position of what you're starting in if you are doing push-ups from your toes or your feet, whatever you want to call it. So with that, I really like regressing. So regressing is a term used for lifts when you're moving backwards from the standard to make it less difficult so that you can increase that difficulty or progress forward towards that goal or standard over time. So progressing a movement is making it more difficult. Regressing is making it easier to meet you where you're at in your skill level. Regressing something doesn't inherently mean a bad thing. It's just making the movement match your current capacity, which will allow you to make way more gains than forcing yourself to do something that you can't do quite yet. So one of the ways I really like to do this is inclining or elevating the push-up to wherever you can meet that range of motion for the reps and sets that you're doing. So this may mean starting with wall push-ups. So if you have to start all the way up to a wall, things like that, that's totally okay. But I'm gonna take you through now some ways that you can do this. So one way is to use a plyo box. So plyo boxes, especially if you have CrossFit gyms or any other sort of gym, have this where you see me flopping it around. They have multiple inches along the side. So this is 24 inches in height, 20 if you have it flat, and then 30 this way. So that's a nice way for you to kind of increase the height of your push-up depending on your skill. So if you are weaker in your upper body, you're not quite trained yet, you're still struggling, you could start with 30 inches off the ground if you needed to, and get up here and have your arms in that plank-like position. I want you to really notice that when I am in this plank position, I'm gonna do it from the side here for you as well. I'm not concaving my body, I really am keeping that nice linear straight movement pattern within it. So same thing from the side here. I'm getting into that shoulder width apart plank position. I'm not going like this, I'm not going like this, I'm keeping that nice tight core, just like we did in the original example from the floor, and pushing and lowering my chest to wherever I'm at and pushing back. And so you can do that, and the goal and way to progress that then, opposite of regressing, progressing would be over time you can decrease the height of what you're doing. And so I'm gonna show you this example of the box. I'll show you an example of the bar here in a second if you don't have boxes, but what you would simply do is flip the box to a shorter height as you improve. So that was 30 inches, and say I did 30 inches for a few weeks. Say my reps and set were generic, 3 by 8 to 10, very classic hypertrophy strength type programming. And I started to feel like I could do more there. So you could then increase your reps, but if your goal is to get closer to the floor, you can just decrease the height and keep your rep range and keep making progress within that. So it looks a lot like this. So simply I flipped the height. So now it is going to be, this is 20 inches, so that might be a big jump, but you could do the 24 inches if you wanted to, which would just be this, just whatever your box is. And so that is 6 inches. Now this is at 24 inches, that's 6 inches shorter than what it was when I was doing it before. And so I'm just getting up and I'm doing the same thing, the nice shoulder width apart, and bringing my elbows kind of like an arrow with my body, and keeping that nice tight core, lowering my chest and pushing off. So you can see when you're doing it elevated, you're developing the muscles and the strength within the muscles that you need to execute the push-up from the floor. But instead of doing it from the floor, which you're not capable of doing it, you're just adding incline, which means that less of your total body weight is essentially being placed over your upper body while you're doing it, so it's being distributed lower. So it's like the same as starting lighter in a squat before increasing weight with a squat. So there's no shame in doing this, it's just a way to decrease how heavy your body weight feels to you as you get stronger within that, but the goal eventually would be able to move your own weight from the floor. So a really easy way to do this if you don't have boxes or you don't want to mess with that, or you don't have a gym that quite has the differences in height that you need to match where you're currently at, or you need to start higher, you maybe don't want to do them on the wall, is to do them on a barbell. So within barbells, the racks in gyms have usually numbered dots, or there's dots, and you can figure out how high the height is. And you can make smaller jumps down in height as you go along, which might be easier than making bigger jumps of multiple inches if you quite don't have that capacity yet. And so you would just simply set up a barbell like wherever you would need it. It doesn't have to be a specific height, just where you feel like you can execute the reps and sets that you need. I suggest just starting higher than you think you can, and you can always go down, just like you can always add weight if you do too light of a set at first. Same idea. So you just set up the barbell wherever you need it, and so you get into that nice plank position. The bar can move back and forth. You want to make sure that bar is pressed all the way against the rack there, so that way you're not rolling forward once you go into it, but it won't budge after that. With this, instead of your hands being flat, you can wrap them around it, or you can kind of keep them flat. It's whatever you prefer. And so you want to get into that nice plank position, right? But it's a little bit more vertical, right? So there's less distribution of your actual weight on your body. And then you're going to go ahead and kind of like keep that nice stiff wrist and come down and press off, and come down and press off. And you can see that that would develop the same thing as a box, but that's a little bit higher, right? That might be a happy medium between a completely vertical wall squat and maybe moving to a box or a bench as you work downwards. But then as you increase over time, what you can do is you can unrack that bar. Say that was too easy. Say I did my 3 by 8 to 10 and that was too easy. I can go and I can take these rigs and I can move them down a little bit lower. I think I did that too. We'll see if this is crooked when I do it. So I can move them down a little bit more. So say I feel a little bit stronger this week, that wasn't quite as hard as I felt like it needed to be. This is now a little bit lower. So all I'm gonna do is get back into my same position, right? But you can see instead of being a little bit more upright like I was before, I'm now out a little bit more, right? Because I'm eventually trying to work down towards the ground. So. And same thing, so as you get closer and closer to getting towards the ground, you can again, over time, bring these down. Say you've been working on this for a few weeks, you're getting a lot stronger, you're getting a lot confident, you're almost ready for that full on the ground push-up, and you're almost there. And you can see, as we work our way down, you're gonna get to here, and you're almost fully distributing your whole body weight over that, right? So you can kind of get into that normal push-up position, shoulder width apart, kind of having straight wrist, moving your weight not back, not forward, but kind of distributed evenly right over that. So you can feel that distributing your body weight across your whole body, not just over your arms and wrist. You brace your core, and then you just and you're that much closer to doing the push-up from the floor. So what can we do once we get to our push-up on the floor that can make this a little bit easier so we can accumulate more volume, more reps, more sets, or just more strength there? We're doing more than just one first push-up. So as I talked about already, a lot of people tend to push their body weight too far forward, too far back, or they don't have that core strength to hold that plank-like position within the push-up that you kind of need to maintain the entire time. A lot of people, I think, put all of their weight on their chest and their upper body, and they expect to move all that weight. Just like in a bench press, a lot of people tend to think that you don't use your legs in that lift, but using your legs allows you to move more weight. So instead of thinking the push-up is only an upper body exercise, yes, it requires upper body strength, it is still a full body involvement within it, so that way you can help distribute your weight, because if you're distributing your weight more appropriately, there will be, essentially, you'll feel like there'll be less weight for you to move when you're actually moving your body off the ground, because it won't be all on you. So with that being said, those plank examples I gave in the very beginning, if you can't do them from the ground, you can scale them or regress them, just like I showed with those push-up positions, where you can hold them from those elevated places and work that way towards the ground too. So you can just build time in that position and strengthen in that position. But I want you to think about that here now in this example that I'm about to give you. So when we are setting up for a push-up, a lot of people really mess up their hand placement and then really mess up kind of where they're putting their shoulders over their body. So with that, with the hands, again, you kind of want that shoulder width apart, but a lot of people try to go too far. So they're doing this like weird square type push-up, really wide push-ups, and there are variations of push-ups, but the standard push-up, or they try to do this thing where it's like close and they're like pushing their elbows out like a T. You kind of want to think of almost making an arrow with your body. That's what a lot of people like to say. So your hands are a little bit beyond shoulder length apart, almost straight out. And when you're going back, you're not going sideways and you're not coming right into your body. You're kind of making this nice little arrow with your body as you're going. So your elbows are kind of going alongside your torso and back to push your weight up. So this is what it's going to look like from the floor. And so it's not really far ahead of you either or below of you. It's kind of right in center with that body mass being nicely distributed like we talked about before, and arrowing back and then arrowing yourself forward. You kind of think of yourself as like a bow and arrow, if that's a fun example for you to do. So with that being said, when you're getting into that position, what you're gonna wanna do is that plank that we've already talked about and you've hopefully been practicing and going through the motions and really thinking about when you're doing your regressed or your progressed elevated push-ups. And that is getting right here in that nice shoulder width apart position, pulling back. And so again, you can shift back and then shift forward to see those differences, but you wanna have that nice middle position. You should feel your core really tight, locked in. You're gonna feel some pressure in your shoulders, but it shouldn't feel like a ton of weight is pushed on your wrist. And you're gonna push down. So just like pull-ups, there's a few ways that you can modify push-ups in order to make them easier, harder, or easier and harder from different angles or different positions, yada, 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 within your lift. And so just like pull-ups, similar approaches apply where you might use things like bands to decrease the amount of force of your body that you're moving, because bands help decrease that resistance by resisting some of that holding up, moving some of your weight for you, or negatives, things like that. So I'm gonna show you that here. So what I did over here is I have the green band set up around a pole here. So this is set up on the squat rack in the rig here, roughly about chest height. So that way, when I'm lifting, the resistance will be kind of right at the base of my sternum, especially because I'm a female and obviously I have breast tissue, so I don't want it across my chest entirely, but kind of right there below at the base of your sternum, so it can help kind of lift up that weight as you're moving yourself upwards. So I'm gonna show you how I set that up now. So same thing, oh my God, my camera's crooked again. Same thing as before, where you're gonna set up normally, but this time you're gonna be starting from the ground, but you're gonna have a band based off whatever resistance you need against what you're trying to do. So with time, you would basically decrease the amount of bands or the strength of the band size. So this is a green band, you might move to a blue or like a red, or maybe a red and an orange as you're decreasing your weight or resistance that it's pushing back against you. You can think of this similar to when you do weighted pull-up machines and you decrease the weight on that. That's kind of what it's doing. So you can allow you to practice moving in the actual push-up position while moving less weight, and then you can decrease that over time as you get closer to moving your own body weight. So let's do it. And so the nice thing about bands is it like changes the resistance pattern across the movement. So that's why people use them with lifts often. But what it means is that at the very bottom of this, when you're at the very bottom, it's going to be having the least amount of weight. So the closer you are to the floor, the least amount of weight you'll be actually pushing back, but it's gonna get harder as you get towards the top. So it's not gonna help as much with that very bottom of your push until you decrease the weight over time, but it will help you, especially with that lockout at the very top. So while it's going to be assisting you the most at the very bottom, that's where you're gonna have the hardest time getting out of the hole of your push-up. It will help you there the most, but you will feel it get a little bit harder as you go through it, and that's because the resistance is greatest as the band is stretched, just like a rubber band, but then the least at the top. So you'll feel like you're actually moving your body weight as you're lowering it or coming back to that top a little bit more, where it's gonna be the easiest at the bottom, and that's the point of using a band. So one last thing that we can do, similar with pull-ups and push-ups, is something called negatives. So negatives are when you do basically only the downward portion, so the lowering in a pull-up, the lowering in a push-up, portion, and then you don't actually do the concentric. So you're only doing the eccentric portion of the lift, and you're not doing the concentric. So eccentric is like essentially the slow lowering phase of your lifts, and concentric is like the force output. So think of the standing up the squat type thing, pushing the bench press away from you. So you only do the negative portion of the lift, and then you reset back at the top. This can help you develop strength within this, so that way you can get used to kind of moving your body weight, lowering it, and that will also help when you then get strong enough to push your weight up against the floor. So when we're doing a negative, you want to get into your normal high plank position or elevated plank position that we've been going over so far, and you want to essentially just take time slowly lowering your body to the ground over the course of like 2 to maybe 5 seconds. It doesn't need to be the slowest, longest thing in your life, but maybe like 2 to 3 seconds even is a good slow controlled lowering eccentric that can help you with controlling your body weight in that lowering phase of the lift. So the biggest thing to take note of there is that you're not pushing back up, you're kind of just resetting back at the top each time, so that you're not doing that concentric push out of the phase, but you're just resetting without actually pushing a lot of force against yourself, coming back out, and then getting back to the top and slowly lowering that negative all over again. So those are my push-up tips for you. If you found this helpful, please, again, like and subscribe to this video. Subscribing helps so much. Leave a comment if you found this helpful, and if you have any other videos that you would love to see and learn. I love teaching about lifting and science, and so I would love to hear from you what you'd like to see. So again, like, subscribe, comment, let us know, and we'll catch you on the next video.